It has always been in human nature to optimize everything as much as possible. Why do math when you can use calculators? Why study for the test when you can just cheat on it? And why take a risk producing a new IP when you can just remake something successful you created decades ago and make tons of money? Video game remakes are certainly nothing new, and the movie industry has basically been doing the same thing for decades. But I feel as though video game remakes are becoming incredibly more commonplace and are, therefore, becoming a bigger issue. I mean, there are a lot of video game remakes being released these past few years. Don't get me wrong, video game remakes aren't the worst thing ever, but I really wish video game companies would innovate and make new games rather than just modernizing the old and golds. In my opinion, a lot of these games that are getting remade aren't really losing their value to the passage of time and should just be made more accessible on modern platforms. I see so many people online nowadays begging developers to remake games that I really just don't think need to be done at all. Game companies are, of course, always listening to these people because it's an easy sell. It doesn't cost quite as much to create entirely new ideas, and it is almost guaranteed to sell well. It's a model that's even better than pumping out 1,000 sequels from the same game series, as we've seen with the likes of Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed. But this is something that game companies definitely try to exploit from time to time. I believe the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes are prime examples of this. Resident Evil 2 remake came out and was a huge success, both critically and commercially. This resulted in built-up hype for the eventual Resident Evil 3 remake. Capcom then exploited that and made a fairly underwhelming and short game that wasn't praised nearly as much as the previous installment. And you know that what I'm saying is true because I never even played RE3 and I got all of my opinions off the internet. This is why I feel like there should be situations to redevelop a game, rather than just remaking every game for a quick buck. I think it's important to lay out the ground rules for what a remaster, remake, and other items with similar symptoms are, and when I think it's appropriate to produce one. Remasters are just games that have been touched up in some way or another. Most of the time, this just means redoing the graphics, or making it HD, or adding better textures, but it could also mean fixing gameplay issues that the original had. Dark Souls Remastered fixed optimization issues that the original game had on PC, and SM64 and Super Mario 3D All-Stars patched out the famous backwards long jump glitch. Remastering games from the PS2 and GameCube era makes sense since they're in that period where they're old enough to look outdated but not so old that they just look like Picasso paintings next to your other games. I mean, who would remaster a game so old you could still count the polygons and then charge $60 for it? That would just be stupid. But remasters of games that only came out a couple of years ago kinda rub me the wrong way. The changes they made to Dark Souls Remastered totally could have been done through just updating the game, but instead, FromSoft took the path of reselling a functioning version of the game. Then again, paying out a couple bucks for this remaster is probably the smallest amount of pain Dark Souls fans have had to endure. However, remasters are starting to become less meaningful since flaws in games post-release can be patched out, and next-gen consoles are able to offer better performance and visuals for current-gen games. Even PC modders have added higher quality visuals to older games like Skyrim and Fallout. That, or you could just spawn Thomas the Tank Engine. Remakes, as the name implies, are games that are completely remade from the ground up. Visuals, coding, voice acting, and oftentimes the music are completely remade from scratch. They're much more time-consuming and costly to make compared to remasters, but often come with a higher price tag and more marketing. In the end, it's still a lot more reliable than taking a risk trying to come up with the next Cyberpunk 2077, only to realize you're actually the next Anthem. There are other types of re-releases that don't really fit into either of these categories though. Things like definitive editions, also called special editions or Game of the Year editions. These either add slightly more content or just package the game's original DLC together. These are pretty harmless most of the time, but sometimes they're clearly made to target fans into buying the game again just so they can get one or two extra things. Example, Square Enix released Kingdom Hearts 2 at the end of 2005. A year and a half later, Square released Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, being pretty much the same game with a AAA price tag but with some new added features. New boss fights at the end of the game, a new difficulty, more collectibles, and some added gameplay elements. Now, did this make the game better? Yeah, it undeniably added more quality content, but was it worth the price tag of a whole new game? As a Kingdom Hearts fan, I would honestly say no. Things like this were more excusable back then because that content couldn't be added to your game via DLC, but companies still try similar things with it, not really being worth your money if you already own the game. When they package all the DLC together into one unit, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes about when the new content is exclusively on that special version of the game. Then you have Ubisoft whipping out the Excel spreadsheets detailing what you will and won't get depending on which version you get. giving you such crazy exclusives like a few cosmetics and a whopping 2 side missions. There are also ports, which are like remasters, but also not really. You basically just bring a game from one platform to another. Maybe there are some changes made to the game, maybe it's left untouched. The PlayStation and Xbox stores are perfect for these kinds of things. One storefront across multiple platforms so that game companies can just throw their legacy titles on there. Nintendo just fucking hates their fans. Ever since the original Wii, every time they release a new console, Nintendo comes out with a new store that requires everything from the old store to be relisted. Then, they shut down the old store after a couple years, requiring you to either have your games downloaded or buy them again on the new store. However, Nintendo has been going crazy with ports this generation, largely because the number of people who have experienced the Wii U is so low, it's outnumbered by the amount of people that have experienced COVID. Every Wii U game is getting ported over to the Switch so it can be experienced by a larger audience, which is nice. But Nintendo is having a tendency to slap on some extra features and call it a deluxe edition to justify a $60 price tag. It's better than having to pay for a dead platform just to play these games, but I wish Nintendo was a little more consumer friendly with their fans. Man, Nintendo really does treat their fans like the middle child of the family. But yeah, those are generally the issues I have with some of the remasters and remakes being thrown out there. I don't really hate these things, but if I didn't play these games as a kid, I doubt I would really change my mind now as an adult. Not every game needs to be remade, and if you really want to play your old games, just dust off the old fucker in your closet and quit begging online. Chances are, it hasn't aged as poorly as you think it has. And video game companies, if you don't listen to me, I swear to God, I'll turn into the next Jim Sterling making generic 10-minute long videos bitching about articles I only read the headline of until you meet my demands.